A very good afternoon to all of you. With me, CA Manoj Agarwal sir, today's faculty for your first session. Mustaqim Sheikh, our coordinator for today. Also sitting with me, Rudesh Pankhania, Regional Council member. A very warm welcome to all of you. Welcome to this refresher course on internal audit. We'll start off by coming to attention for the ICAI motto.
येष सुप्तेषु जाग्रति येष सुप्तेषु जाग्रति कामं 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 कामपुरुषो पुरुषो निर्विमाणः निर्विमाणः तदेव शुक्रं तद्ब्रह्मा तद्ब्रह्मा तदेवामृतमुच्यते तस्मिन् लोकः शतः सर्वे तदूनात्यपि कश्चन एतद्द्वैता 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 एतद्द्वैता.
Thank you. So coming to what this internal audit refresher course is all about. So basically, we have designed this course for people who would like to either enter the internal audit field or would like to refresh their basics of internal audit. And each session is designed around specific internal audit standards of the ICAI as well as the IIA. And we would all the faculties would also be discussing each of the standard from IIA as well as our own IASB, and would also be taking you through practical case studies. And I think it would be a very, very beneficial and give you deeper insights into the internal audit profession and what approach now coming, the changing approaches that are required in the internal audit profession. I hope all of you are very happy learning. We have some excellent faculties lined up through this refresher course. It's a, as all of you know, it's a 5-part series, each one Friday, each part, and each part is then divided into two sections, one faculty for each section. So I wish all of you a very happy learning. Basically, I think internal audit is it's one of the, it is already a very important part of our profession, but I think it's a very, very looking to the changing scenarios. It's one of the rising stars or a rising area where more and more opportunities are likely to come. So it's I again wish all of you happy learning. I would now request my council colleague CA Rudesh Pankhania to introduce our today's faculty, CA Manoj Agarwal. Rudesh, just hold on.
Thank you so much and welcome everyone. As I'm Rudesh Pankhania. As we are aware that today's topic, the first session is governing framework and basic principles ICAI framework and IAE. I'm very glad to introduce CA Manoj Agarwal sir, who is a chartered accountant, a fellow chartered accountant, and a diploma in information system audit from ICAI. He also holds CIA certified internal auditor and certification in risk management assurance from IIA USA. He's also a CISA from ISACA. He has held commendable positions like course director for enterprise risk management for ICAI in 2010 and committee for members in industry for WIRC. He's currently a member of International Internal Audit Standard Board of Institute of Internal Auditors, USA, in training committee chair of IIA India and a strategy advisor board of IRM India affiliate. Manoj Agarwal sir writes blog on risk and control, which is available on LinkedIn and on www.toolsforgovernance.com. He is a leading internal audit and risk management department of one of India's largest, specially footwear retailers, and has 20 plus years of experience in this field. We definitely look forward to your session, sir. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. Over to you, Manoj, sir.
Uh, Thanks, Hridesh, and thanks, Rahul Parekh and Murtaza for inviting me to deliver this session at my alma mater. So it's a proud day for me. So friends, I believe that everyone, so more than the people who attends the conference or seminar, it is the trainer who learns. So I hope you all will give me an opportunity to learn from you by asking questions. Feel free to ask questions, any point of time, at any point of the slides. So I'm sharing my screen. Just allow me a second. Mustaqim, can you let me know whether the slideshow is presented or it is the
नहीं हुआ अभी तक
कुछ भी नहीं हुआ है क्या? Okay. अभी क्या ये
तो अभी
PPT
आया फुल स्क्रीन
ओके फुल स्क्रीन पे विजिबल है ना बढ़िया
यस यस विजिबल
so friends so I would expect a lot of questions from you so my profile so they have already shared the profile so which covers all the aspects so I will skip this slide now this is the most important slide for me because this is for my personal risk management. All the contents of the presentation constitute the opinion of the speaker, that is me and my alone, and they do not represent the views and opinion of my employer, my supervisors, nor do they represent the views of the organization, business institution the speaker is or has been a part of. Some of the situation that I mentioned may not be true, and the identities of any parties involved may have been disguised. Images used are subject to copyright. Now, the personal risk management has been taken care. So I've been given two topics. So the first topic is governing framework and basic principles, ICAI and IIA, IPPF. So let's start with the basic definition. What is the definition of internal audit as per ICAI and as per IIA? Most probably you will find that there is hardly any difference. Maybe some difference, some cosmetic difference, some wordsmithing, or some, some is slightly brief, some is slightly enlarged. Now, what I have done, I have put both the definitions on one screen and also highlighted the commonality between these two definitions. Uh, Now, why I'm taking this? The reason I'm taking this is the definition of internal audit is the basic and the main component of the governing framework concerning the internal audit. For example, ICAI definition says internal audit provide independent assurance on the effectiveness of the internal controls and risk management processes to enhance governance and achieve organizational objective. You will find that these words are being used in more or less similar order in the definition used by IIA. Now, it has slightly different connotation by using some words. For example, it's using the word objective assurance. Now, objective assurance, does it means that we are the internal audit need to provide assurance on that the objective of the organization are being achieved? Yes, and is also there achieve organizational objective. It carries an additional words like consulting activity. So the ICI definition is more control oriented. Now the IIA definition also include the consulting activities, which is designed to add value, improve organization's operations. It helps an organization accomplish its objective by bringing a systematic, disciplined approach to evaluate. Now, these words may not be present in the definition, but they are definitely present in the various standards as laid down by ICAI, which we will be seeing subsequently. Now, if many of you will find that these are the similar definition, but at the same time, few of you may find that it has slightly, those definitions differ, and based on that difference, there might be some areas which may create conflicts between these two standards. So let's see whether we are in a position to identify such kind of conflicts. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask me. I would be more than happy to answer your questions. Now, so before I venture into the ICI standards, one thing everyone should be cognizant of the fact is how the standards are being designed, framed. The standards are designed based on the best practices. And what is best practices? Best practices is something which give the desirable output, which increases the transparency, which increases the overall betterment of whatever process you are taking it up. So once you codify the best practices, it gives you the standard. Of course, you need to then open up that standard for public comment, create disposition table for taking care of those public comments, how those comments have been dealt with. Some of might be accepted, some of might will be rejected, and coming out with the final standard. And the process is similar in both the institute. So these standards, what we are seeing in front of us are the common best practices codified into a text form, which we all are supposed to follow. Now, these standards are mandatory for members of the institute. Similarly, the standards issued by the IIA, they are mandatory to their members. Of course, they use the word internal auditors. They don't use the word members. And this ICI standards essentially is applicable to an individual who is a member and to a firm who is a member of ICAI, vis-a-vis any private organization can be a part of IIA. So the private organization's internal audit department, the standards are equally applicable. Now, ICI standards has various parts. So all those parts constitute the standards of internal audit in entirety. So it has some preface to framework standards, framework governing internal audit, basic principles of internal audit. It has 100 series, which gives standards on key concepts. For example, 110, 120. It defines what is assurance, what are the types of assurance, the nature of assurance. 120, it defines internal controls, the types of internal control. 200 series, standards on internal audit management, management of internal audit function. Now, all this, I'm sure you have you're following in your day-to-day practices. So yes, this presentation will be circulated to the participating members. It will be shared with the C Institute and they will be sharing the same. So we were on the standards on internal audit management. So for example, 210, it covers the managing the internal audit function. Okay, how an internal audit function need to be managed, what are the basic constituents of this management. For example, what requires internal audit function to be managed. For example, resourcing plan. Of course, we are going to cover that item in detail in the subsequent slides. Then conducting overall internal audit planning. 220. It tells, it guides an internal auditor how to do the planning, how to what variables they need to consider while doing the planning. For example, the planning may cover what are the resources they may need to have on board. What if they don't have the resources, how to get those resources. Then what are the objectives of that engagement, and how to go about organizing your internal audit. Objectives of internal audit. Now, these objectives of internal audit, uh, uh, this may vary to some extent based on the organization, but every internal audit are carried out with certain objectives. Now, take for example section 138, which requires companies to have internal audit if they have if they are meeting certain criteria. So one of the things that internal auditors need to take care is the internal financial control. So some of your audit may be helping an organization to meet the objective of internal financial control. Some of you may be carrying out internal audit for revenue assurance. So the objective for that audit would be how to give assurance on the revenue, whether it is complete, nothing is missed out, there is no leakages, no excess, no under reporting of revenue. So this particular standards deals with the objectives of internal audit. 240, using the work of an expert. Now, uh, it is quite possible for various assignments that we carry out in one or two, we may not have the right expertise. It is quite possible that that particular area would be subject to in a number of audits. In this kind of scenario, how best we can use the work of an expert. So this section standard 240 is being used for that. Standards on the conduct of audit assignment. Now 300 to 400 series gives how to conduct an audit assignment. Planning the internal audit assignment. See, you will see the planning. And there is also section standard 220, conducting overall internal audit planning. So section 380, we will come back, later slide. So let's see. So planning the internal audit assignment. So in this particular, the standard covers how to go about planning an individual audit. A standard 320, it deals with the internal audit evidence, types of internal audit evidence. It can be external evidence, it can be internal evidence, it can be paper-based, it can be interview-based, it can be observance, it can be negative testing, it can be positive testing. Standard 330 deals with internal audit documentation. That now, how best to ensure that we have done a quality job. So this would be assessed by somebody else. It can be part of the internal audit department. It can be part of an external firm who will come and do something called let's say peer review, or it can be an external quality assessment. Some of the organization have their internal department ISO 9001 certified. So maybe the ISO 9001 auditor does this assessment, whether that has been done in a quality manner. a standard 350 review and supervision of audit assignment. So this covers how an audit assignment need to be reviewed and supervised. Now, uh, see, unless in certain internal audit department, if those are slightly big size, so they may have a dedicated quality assurance department, or they are dedicated people to do the supervision. This will also entail your manager who provides supervision to the individual staff internal auditors, or it can be the supervision which is provided by a principal to his team. Standard 360 deals with the communication with management, how this, when to communicate, what to communicate, in what shape to communicate, what are the best practices of communication with management. And section standard 370 covers the reporting results. So any internal audit, especially carried out by an external service provider, we cannot be said, we cannot say it is complete unless the reports comes in. And what is the form of that report? So that get covers under standard 370 reporting results. Standard 390 monitoring and reporting of prior audit issues. Now, unless we monitor, track, report on the previous audit issues, then we may not be ensuring that the issue has been properly closed. It is quite possible if we don't do this, we might be reporting an issue, year after year after year, and that there it goes. There goes your systematic approach to the entire internal audit work. Now, is standard 380 is obsolete? I won't say no, because see, we can always insert section 380, and if required, we can also insert the standard 381. So, but today there is no section 380. So let me go to the next slide. So if anyone has any question on, any practical challenges in application of this standards, do raise a question. I would love to hear your issue and try to answer that. There are various other standards that are also issued. For example, 5 on sampling, 6 on analytical procedures, 7 on quality assurance, then on fraud in internal audit, enterprise risk management, IT, consideration of law, related parties. Now, this consideration of fraud in an internal audit. Now, this is a very interesting idea, standard, and I would say this is one of the most challenging thing to an internal auditor, because whenever a fraud occurs, the first question that has been raised is, where were internal auditors? And mind you, uh, the internal auditor may says that they do not have any role in fraud detection, fraud prevention. So in some aspect they may be right, but largely they may be in error. Why they may be in error? Because as part of internal audit, while planning, you need to do your risk assessment. As part of your risk assessment, you need to cover the various risk that an organization is subject to, and one of the risk would be the fraud risk. So you need to take care of the fraud risk as part of your risk assessment exercise. While doing this assessment, you need to also factor in the various controls that organization has. If organization does not have basic hygiene to prevent fraud, for example, lack of segregation of duty, there are areas where there is no segregation of duty, then though that area is subject to a heightened risk of fraud. So you need to consider that since lack of there is no segregation of duty, the risk of fraud exists, and you need to apply procedures accordingly. Now, if an industry is subject to a fraud, there are industries which are very prone to fraud, and of course there are all the function they are also subject to fraud. So whenever you take up an assignment, be it part of in-house department or an external service provider, you are supposed to have the knowledge of the various fraud risk that exist within the industry. Now, if you say that, hey, I'm new in this industry, then both the standards of IIA and ICAI requires you to gain appropriate knowledge of that particular industry, and this knowledge include the fraud risk before you take up that engagement. So you see, you are responsible to assess the fraud risk. Now, fraud might be happening, but as long as you are doing that your assessment, I believe to a large extent, 80, 90, 95%, you would be in a position to prevent fraud. You would be carrying out an audit of any assignment. Let's say you carry out any assignment, say procure to pay, procurement. Conflict of interest is one of the major reason why a fraud can happen. And if they don't have this basic hygiene factor to ask people working in the department to give a undertaking that there is no conflict of interest, then you need to do this kind of activities. So, so anyone has any questions, do let me know. Now, these are the standards of IIA. So IIA standards, they have divided into two parts: attribute standards and the performance standard. So attribute standards, so 1000 series, 1100 series, 1200 series, 1300 series, these are the attribute standards. They basically covers what is the purpose, authority, and responsibility of internal audit, what is independence, objectivity, what is proficiency and due professional care, what is quality assurance and improvement program. You will find the similar thing in IIA standards as well. So I have a question: how can assess fraud? So my dear friend, you are not assessing fraud. You are assessing fraud risk. Let's take an example. You go in a organization. Let me assume you are a service provider. You go there. So as part of the onboarding, I expect you to ask certain questions. Okay, do they have any whistleblower mechanism in place? If there is a finance function in the finance, do they have a dual signatory, dual approval? Is this part and parcel of their various policies, procedures? Do the people have documented, do the SOP exist? Do some MIS exist? Do the basic hygiene check, a duplicate check in case of vendor. Is there any, vendor duplicate check exists? How the vendor master is codified in case there are two vendors. Are they in a position to detect? Are they in a position to detect duplicate invoices? Uh, uh, is the company has some process policy or background check? So these various things, you can call it principle of governance, or you can call the basic necessities for prevention of fraud. So you need to assess that. Now, when you go about an auditing in a function, let's take HR function for an example. So you should be aware that there is there is a possibility that ghost employees can exist. There is a possibility that the time and attendance system can be gained. There is a possibility that the conflict of interest exists. For example, uh, say the relatives are in a reporting position, then your recruitment, when you do recruitment, there is a possibility that the resume which has come in a normal manner, it has been passed on to your friend and who is submitting the same as recruitment agencies. So so recruitment agencies and anticipate whether they are existing or this is only one off transaction, how we are capturing the source. Then uh, what are the various policies? For example, somebody is claiming an HRA. Do the company has right kind of policies, procedures to ensure that they are not gaming the system? For example, they are not leasing their home out and leasing back. So these are various risks. So if you are aware about those risks, you are going to, while as you might be doing an HR audit, but you are also going to assess this function or this particular risk. And once you do this kind of risk assessment, then you would be in a position to comment whether the appropriate control exists to prevent, prevent fraud. In spite of that, you may not be able to detect a a fraud which can be committed in collusion, but at least you have ensured that the the basic hygiene exists to prevent a fraud. I hope I am able to answer your question. So what to do as an internal auditor in a scenario where frauds are being done by employees and same is already known to CEO, and there is a backing of top management to people involved. Now, you have two questions. I would say that you have at least two ways. One, you can raise this issue. You can take this issue to the board of directors. Secondly, you can walk out. So there might be third scenario, but I believe you have at least these two issues, because even if you issue an audit report, you may not get a response, or it will be getting delayed so much that uh, you may decide to scrap it. Now, if you're an internal employee, then you have another means. You can raise a visa, but most possibly it is going to the CEO. And let me ask you one a question. If a fraud is known to CEO and CEO is not taking an action, then what they are looking for would be your rubber stamp. Now something happens, it is you who is going to go into a jail. So you need to decide how you want to tackle this particular situation. So I have a question. If I have to define the scope of internal audit, select areas for internal audit, what is the standard methodology for selection of internal audit areas, assuming that I work with a company and in the process of appointing internal auditors? So we all heard about the risk-based internal audit. So what happens in risk-based internal audit? You first define what is your audit universe. Based on that definition, sorry. So first of all, you need to define your internal audit universe or audit universe. What does it contain? Then this audit universe, you need to assess based on the risk, whether you believe it's a high risk area, low risk area. Once you define that, then you need to decide what are the resources available. Since you are appointing internal auditor, I assume that is not a challenge. So you define what areas I want to get it audited. You may also like to decide what frequency. Some company wants their internal audit to cover an area, say every 3 year. So 3 year rotational plan. Some may want every 2 years, so 2 year rotational plan. So once you do that, you would be in a position to identify what areas to be given. Of course, you can also use, for example, you can apply Pareto rule, 80-20. So wherever the 80% value, 20% volume, typical example, revenue, payroll, your IT system, compliances. So this is how you can go about defining it. But generally what I do, I take up the trial balance, identify the important items. I also define audit universe, do a risk assessment. I take care of, there are a couple of themes which is always present: compliances and IT systems. And finally, I want to, and I try to audit the future. What do you mean by audit the future? See, your company would be in a process of implementing a new system, or they would be about to roll out a new policy. So I try to audit pre-implementation, whether it is appropriate, whether it is taken care, whatever risk I can foresee, and post-implementation, whether whatever the company has decided in terms of objective for rolling out that system and the policy, whether those are being getting met. Now, so once you define your internal audit areas, you can decide how best to go about giving that to your new internal auditor. Reporting to government under Companies Act, under fraud related provision. So your CARO requires you to companies to report certain items to certain authorities. Some companies have taken a stand that they will report each and everything. Some companies have taken a stand that they will not report certain frauds, though they may be calling a fraud, but below a certain threshold. For example, a company says that you take your Lux, it might be coming for about say 30-40 rupees. Some says, Kena, if somebody is stealing one Lux soap from the factory, it's a theft, it's a fraud. But do you want to report that? I don't think so. So Mustaqim, you have raised your hand. So you want to ask something?
No, sir. Please carry on.
Okay. So I have a question. While doing an IFC assignment in HR payroll, HR manager sends the sheet to other agency for processing the payroll monthly payment. So as an IFC auditor, should we check the control applied by third party agency? Now this is very important question. So so let's assume you are an external internal audit service provider and your client is doing this. Then as part of the engagement, pre-engagement planning, you would be asking, okay guys, give me your internal financial control list. Now, if the internal financial control list contains the controls as it is existing at other agencies' place, so let's say there is a company A which gives payroll to a payroll processing company called B. Now, if the company A's IFC control list documentation contains the control which is in place at company B, then yes, you are supposed to verify that. But honestly, if this kind of scenario exists, then I would advise my client that this activity which is happening is not in your control. So why you are putting in your internal financial control? Now, as far as the risk is considered, so that can be tackled either there are multiple ways. So one way is there is a contractual obligation where you put various obligations in a contract to this third party payroll processor. There is also a concept called audit of service organization. So so in America, it is called SSAE, Audit of Service Organization. So there are reports. We have a similar standards. If I remember correctly, the standard is called the Audit of Service Organization or service providing entities. So in that particular thing, you are going as a representative of the organization which has outsourced that work to the company which is processing it, and you are validating all the controls which the company has promised to put in place in processing of this particular payroll. So I hope I'm able to answer your query. So IPPF has attribute standards and performance standard. So attribute standards are performance, authority, responsibility, independence, objectivity, professional and professional, due professional, and quality assurance. So the purpose, authority, responsibility get covered under 1010, which is recognizing mandatory guidance in the internal audit charter. This standard basically says that the authority of internal audit need to be recognized in the internal audit charter, and this internal audit charter need to be approved by either the board or the audit committee. So which gives an authority to internal auditors to go and do their internal audits as required. We are expecting them to have full access. So the internal audit charter would have internal audit has access to all the systems, the data, and the people as part of their duties. Independence and objectivity. So in organizational, so it requires that what is the positioning of an internal auditor, a chief audit executive. If chief audit executive has not been placed appropriately in the organizational structure, then it is not, it will, but it may compromise the internal auditor's independence. One of the main criteria of independence is the access to the board. If they have direct interactions with the board, direct access to the board, so they may be independent. Then individual objectivity. So, during my article days, some of the student articles used to say that so I didn't like, so I created this kind of issues. So if we are doing this, then we are definitely not objective. Objectivity means whether it is friend or enemy, right process, wrong process, we perform with the same due diligence. We are not going with the preconceived mind. We are open. We are looking whether the objective is getting met. Now, just for example, SOP, an SOP can be 2-pager, it can be 20-pager, it can be 200 pages. As long as the objective is getting met, it does not matter if it is 200-pager or 2-pager. SOP is right. It also covers what to do in case there is an impairment to independence or objectivity. For example, the internal auditors are required to disclose that to the audit committee. Proficiency and due care. So it has this proficiency. Proficiency means you have the expertise to perform that particular assignment. Now, for example, you don't have, okay, let me ask this question. If you are asked to perform a system audit and you don't have any background in the system audit, can you take up that assignment? The answer is no. Of course, the answer can be no. However, if you are ready to undergo a course, obtain some certification, obtain some training, gain some proficiency, then can you carry out that assignment? Answer is yes. Due professional care. Now, I have a very interesting example. As internal auditors, we deal with various processes. We always say that it has to be process based, not person based. Uh, in so let me give, to err is to human. If to err is to human, then so let me ask you a question. If you are in a position to answer, do provide. So let me give you a hypothetical situation. Uh, let's say you are doing an audit of insurance premium, and as part of that, you realize that the the insurance agent, they have given you premium which is very low. And why they have given this premium very low? Because they have done an error in the calculation. Now, tell me, is this insurance agent, while giving you the insurance premium quotation, have they exercised the due professional care? Let's say the error is, so the normal premium is 10 rupees and they are giving you premium of 1 rupees. Now tell me, have they taken a due professional care or not? I would love to see some answers or some questions. So, so am I getting some answers? Okay. So the answer is no, they have not taken due professional care. And why I'm saying this, because if my work is to give insurance premium day in, day out, and I'm giving 10% premium and I'm not applying my mind, that means there is something seriously wrong. I have not taken due professional care. I cannot take the shelter that I have taken due professional care. So the question is, what should be the basic content of the internal audit charter? The basic content of internal audit charter would be the authority of internal audit, that they have authority to take up any audit, any data, any system, any person. They have full authority to interact with anyone, and everyone is required to give them time, access, data. Then it would contain the the resourcing plan. It would contain the reporting structure. It would contain what are the areas, when I say areas, broad areas, what are the limits to their authority, if any. For example, in my company, my authority has been decided by the chairman by saying internal audit has all power. So that become internal audit charter. Of course, internal charter would contain something more, but that gives me an absolute authority in terms of accessing any data, any system, any person as part of my internal audit. The one of the attribute standard also requires the on the continuing professional standard, CPRs. So they need to continuously update themselves. Quality assurance and improvement program. Now this is one of the very important items, which says that the internal audit need to continuously assess their work for quality and to find improvement opportunity. And once they find improvement opportunity, they need to work upon that. And this standard 1321, it says that once you are meeting all the requirements, only then you can use the word conform with the international standards on professional practice of internal auditing. That is, you can use this word and language in your audit report. And it also requires the internal auditors to report any non-conformance to the board as part of their annual reporting. Performance standards. So it covers the managing of internal audit activity, nature of work, engagement planning, your performing engagement, communicating results. You see, it will be similar thing. Of course, some places there would be more number of standards, some would be less, some would be more headings, less text, less heading, more text. So managing internal audit, planning, communication, resource management, policy, coordination, action service provider, engagement planning, communicating results. So both of them covers the entire gamut. So any internal auditor, if it's a new internal auditor, it helps them guide what are the activities they can carry out. For example, let's take 2040. Now, a member of your team can say, sir, what are the policies, procedures? What are the policies? How to handle an audit? If I need to start an audit, how should I start? There will be engagement planning, engagement form, how to do that planning, how to identify audit universe, how to do risk assessment, how to do sampling, now how to maintain working papers, who's going to supervise, when they're going to supervise, how the filing would be done, how the draft report would be issued, to whom it would be issued, and when and how the final report would be issued, distribution list. All those things can be part and parcel of your policies and procedures. Uh, so these are various standards now, like criteria for communication. When you should be communicating, how you should be communicating, and errors and omissions. So just to avoid errors and omission, people need to ensure that there is appropriate quality assurance program is in place. The 2600, this is very, very interesting one. So the question was, the CEO knows some risk exists and is still not doing something. So this may be happening number of times. You are reporting a risk, and client says, "Ki we are fine with that risk." Now, in that kind of scenario, what should we do? The simple answer is that client should communicate that they are fine with the risk to the board. The moment it happens, that means the client has accepted the risk, and it has been communicated to the right authorities. If board of director has any issues, they will say ki they are not fine, they are not happy. Else, the risk has been accepted. So you don't have to bother now for that particular risk. So so this basically is basically the broadly this performance standards. Now I'm not going in depth because I believe that would be done by my other co-speakers who will be taking up various sessions as part of this series over 5 Fridays. So basic principles. These are the basic principles of internal audit: independence, integrity, objectivity, due professional care, confidentiality, skills and competence, risk-based audit, system, process, approach, participation in decision-making, sensitivity, and quality and continuous improvement. So this is all from ICAI, but if you notice, it is a similar thing, something similar you have also read in IIA. So independence, free from undue influence, independence shall not only in mind, but also in appearance. So the requirement is you may be independent, but you should also be seen as independent, and you should also be acting as an independent. For example, say you are observing something. You have anyway planned to report that particular thing. Now, but somebody else says, hey, you report that, and you're reporting that. Now, one time it may be okay, but let's say this is happening 3 4 times. Now, in this kind of scenario, it is quite possible that your independence may seem to be impaired, unless you say that person that it is not none of that person business, it is your business, and you know what need to be reported and not. If you give the impression that you listen to a particular person, a particular set of persons, then it can impair your independence, even though you are not impaired. Internal audit functions shall be positioned outside the function which are subject to internal audit. Now, this requirement is very important, but alas, this particular requirement is not being exercised in a large company. In a large company, internal audit reports into finance function, and finance is subject matter to of audit in largely most of the internal audits. So they are reporting to their boss, who happens to be the boss of the finance function. So which is a problematic. So the right position for internal audit function is outside of the function. It can be, it can be to reporting to CEO, it can be reporting to the chairman of the company, it can be directly under the wings of the board, our chairman and CEO. Integrity and objectivity. An internal auditor need to have integrity. Integrity means imandari. You know that the person is not taking any undue benefit for his or her benefit. And objectivity is they are not favoring someone, they are not biased against someone. So they are taking as a highly professional person and give examination assessment with an open mind. Due professional care. So they need to exercise due professional care. So again, now again, it's a question you can ask yourself. You go to an organization and you see that there is no segregation of duty. A person can perform a large number of the entire operations, entire, let's say, he or she can raise a PO, book an invoice, receive the goods, make the payment. Now, if you are not raising the issue of segregation of duty here, then you can't say that I'm not responsible for fraud, so I'm not going to do that. It is your duty to report that fact. If you're not doing that, then you might be guilty of not taking due professional care. Confidentiality. Confidentiality, see, this confidentiality is a very interesting subject. It is part and parcel of the standards on internal audit of ICAI, but it is not part of the IPPF, though it is part of the code of ethics of IIA. Confidentiality is one of the basic requirements. If internal auditor is not able to maintain the confidentiality of the information they received, then they are not going to be in the job for a long period of time. Skills and competence. This is, you need to have the right skills and competence to undertake the assignment. Now, these skills and competence can be with you individually, or it can be within the team as part of the team skill set, or it can be within the internal audit function. But if the assignment requires a particular skill sets which the team may not have, then the team should not be doing an audit of that. Of course, they can ask the concerned team member who has the right expertise to come audit that particular function, and then you can use that the results of those audit. And of course, the use of external expert come into play. risk-based audit. So this I've covered earlier. So the world and India both have moved away from transaction-based audit. They have moved to risk-based audit. In this, so the audit is performed on the activities which is considered to be risky activity. When I say risky, it's not the risk or reward, but the assessment of those activity is on a higher side. System and process focus. So, so whenever we are doing an audit, we need to bring the system and the process focus. It means that whatever we are doing a systematic manner as a process. Sampling. So there are various sampling method. One of the sampling method is haphazard method. That means that there is no method. So if you do this kind of sampling as a routine sampling, then you may not be following the basic principles. Participation in decision making. Avoid passing any judgment or render an opinion on past management decision, and avoid participation in operational decision making. So it says ki in the past, if a management decision has been taken, quite possible it may look wrong today, but it may be right that point of time. So so you should, as a process improvement, you can suggest something, but you should not be commenting that the decision that point of time was wrong. So it brings me to another facets of reporting. See, company wants internal auditors to do a constructive reporting, which leads to positivity, which leads to betterment, improvement. They are not looking for negativity. That is, they are not looking for criticism, fault finding, finger pointing, blaming, and avoid participation in operational decision making. So if you see on the left hand side, just independent, the second line, the internal audit function shall be positioned outside the function which are subject to internal audit. Okay, and here they are saying avoid participation in operational decision making. So if you are participating in a decision making of an activity, then how can you audit that particular activity? You can't. Of course, as an internal auditor, you can take decision within your department, but you can't be taking decision in finance, for example, in account receivable, what to do, or accounts payable, what to do. You can give your inputs, you can advise them, but you can't decide. Sensitive to multiple stakeholder interests. Uh, See, whenever you do something, you need to be quite sensitive to various stakeholders. For example, your internal audit report. Now, it would be read by say finance people, operation people, board, sometimes regulators, your statutory auditors. So you need to be quite sensitive to all their needs. At the same time, the needs of the organization. While reporting, you need to also consider that your report would be read by so many other people. So is there something which can give wrong conclusion or wrong reading to a stakeholder? If something is there, then you need to take appropriate care to ensure that no wrong or undue interpretation can be taken of the various finding observation raised by you. And quality and continuous improvement, ensure factual accuracy of the observation and validate the accuracy of all finding. So this particular thing also includes to ensure factual accuracy of observation. Now, are we doing audit based on evidence or based on hearsay? Audit means to hear. But if you're doing audit based on your hearing, then you're not doing an audit. You need to ensure that whatever you're reporting, those are right, completely right, gives the right and true and fair view, and to validate the accuracy of all findings. So even if your findings is right, you need to ensure that it is accurate, because you're doing an internal audit. You need to be as precise as possible. So I have here I have added some questions. Now I'm looking for answers from you guys. So I would be also giving an answer, but so feel free to answer this question. So let me read it out. An internal audit charter describes the mission and scope of internal audit activity, responsibilities of internal audit activity, accountability of chief audit executive, independence of IIA, sorry, internal audit activity, and standards followed by internal audit activity. Which of the following also should be included in the charter? Purpose of the internal audit activity. Internal audit right to have unrestricted access to function records, personal and physical property. A detailed audit plan or program for the year. Job specification and description of the internal audit staff. So I have received a response. Uh, so the person who has answered ABD, so you have to select only one. Which one you will take? It's multiple choice question. You will need to select only one option, either A or B or C or D. So right now I have two answers here. So one says B and another says A. Now, see, both can be right, but now we have to take only one. So if I need, if given a choice, I need to include only one sentence, I would include the option. Okay, we are so we are still in two options, A and B. If somebody wants to have C and D, feel free to say so. So I have C also. So let me answer. Kina, will I include the C, yes or no? Then I would say answer is no. And the reason being, so internal audit charter, I'm not going to go to my board every year and asking them, please reapprove my internal audit charter, because I have revised my internal audit plan for the current year, or there would be change in the internal audit plan for the next year. That's the reason I want you to approve it. So I'm not going to do that. So C, I'm not going to include into my internal audit charter. And for the similar reason, I will also not include the D. So on one hand, I may be tempted to have that, so that it gives duties. But this is the charter. This job description in any evolving organization will be undergoing change every year because of change in technology, change in personnel, change in role, change in operation size, nature. So that may be going to change. So I may not include it. Maximum I will include their organogram, that internal audit reports into whom. Maybe couple of designations, but that's it. So the real purpose, the real thing fights between A and B. So see the purpose of IAA internal audit activity, the moment internal audit exists, the purpose is there. Now, this purpose, when we document it, it is quite possible that we may document they need to have an access, unrestricted access. But the moment internal audit department exists, the one of the major reason they need charter is because charter establishes the authority of internal audit. So I would like to include the answer B, which that internal audit has unrestricted access to the function, people, personal records. So they are in a position to carry out that activity. So that's the reason I will be going for option B. So let me go to next question. Now, which of the following activities should be performed by internal activities to facilitate an effective relationship with the audit committee? Periodically report about accounting standards followed by organization. Provide assurance to audit committee that its charter activities processes are appropriate. Ensure that role and activities of the internal activity are clearly understood and responsive to the needs of the audit committee. Maintain open, effective communication with audit committee. So you have a choice A, 1 and 2, which is accounting standards and assurance. Option B, which is 3 and 4, rules and activities of internal audit and maintain open effective communication. C, periodic, accounting standards, rules and activity, effective communication. Or D, assurance, role and effective communication. So I have an answer which says B, 3 and 4. And I have an answer. So it seems I have two answers. Okay, I have an answer. So now I have B, C, and D. So, okay. So let me talk about this. Periodically report about accounting standards followed by the organization. Why should internal audit reports about the accounting standards followed by the organization? If at all they need to report something, they should be reporting the non-compliances with the accounting standards. Accounting standards the organization has to follow. So if something had to be reported, they would be reporting non-compliances. So they are not going to, or they should not be reporting one. Provide assurance to audit committee that charter activity processes are appropriate. Now this assurance, once they say my charter activity processes are appropriate, is also an assurance that the work that I'm doing is appropriate and I'm ensuring that the risks are controlled, contained, objectives are being met. I'm giving assurance on the objective. So this is something, two is something which I believe should be given, should be performed by internal audit activity. That roles and activities of internal audit are clearly understood and responsive to the needs of audit committee. So is internal audit listening to audit committee? Audit committee says, I want IT audit to be done. Are they carrying on an IT audit? Do they have the authority, appropriate skill sets? So are they, let me put it this, are they carrying out the management request or audit committee request? If answer is yes, they need to report back that they are doing it. So third would also be there, and maintain open and effective communication. Now we don't have any 2 and 3, but we have 2, 3, and 4. So maintain open and effective communication. Yes, that is the most basic element of an effective relationship. So answer is D. Another question. A chief audit executive learns that the brother-in-law of a senior auditor who audits the procurement process was hired as the head of procurement department 6 months prior. Which of the following is the most important action for CE to take? So chief auditor or executive knows that One of his team members, brother-in-law, is the head of department for procurement, for which this person audits. So which of the following is the most appropriate action? A, CE should not interfere because there is no evidence that a conflict of interest had occurred. B, CE should remind senior auditor of his obligation to be objective and impartial. C, CE should change senior auditor's assignment, take corrective action for the auditor's failure to disclose a conflict of interest. D, CA should require senior auditor to disclose the relationship in writing before continuing his responsibility for monitoring process, monitoring procurement. So let's see what do we have answered. So any answers? Hello? Yes. So I have C, D, and D. C and D. No, you can take only one. So either C or D. Okay. So let's analyze this. Okay, I have another D. So A, CA should not interfere because there is no evidence that a conflict of interest has occurred. Now, A is obviously wrong. There is a conflict of interest. Just because something wrong has not happened does not mean that the conflict of interest does not exist. So it exists because there is a relationship and somebody is in a position to misuse that relationship. So A is definitely wrong answer. B, should remind senior auditor of his obligation to be objective and impartial. So it's like that a senior auditor is a dumb person. He doesn't remember the standard and CA need to remind him. ये तेरा duty है, duty को पूरा कर. So that is also a wrong answer because CA is need to take responsibility of whatever action he is taking. So reminding someone of his obligation is not exercising of his responsibility. Now between CA and D. So CAE should require senior auditor to disclose the relationship. Now, if senior auditor is disclosing the relationship in writing, does it takes care of the conflict of interest risk? I don't think so. And this disclosure, even if they are taking it without safeguard, the conflict of interest does exist. Look at the option C, should change the internal audit assignment. The moment the assignment will change, so now there is no auditor relationship between the auditor and the brother-in-law who is head of the department. So he has taken a corrective action. But at the same time, this auditor who going there for an audit has not disclosed that my brother-in-law is the head of the department. So which is a failure. So he need to also take appropriate action to ensure that it serves a right example. So C is the right option. Chief Audit Executive of a mid-sized pharma has operational responsibility for the regulatory compliance function. Very interesting. This happens a lot in India. And also, let me also tell you, this also happens a lot in Western countries. Audit committee requests an assessment of regulatory compliance. According to IAA guidelines, which of the following is the CA's best course of action? So I would say just ignore the according to IAA guidelines, but which is the best course of action for CA? Have a proficient internal audit staff member perform an assessment and disclose the impairment. B, have a regulatory compliance member perform a self-assessment to be reviewed by an expert internal auditor. C, have an expert internal auditor perform audit and report the result of the assessment directly to senior management. And D, contact a third-party entity, external auditor, to complete the assessment and report to the board. So, friends, which one you will take? Okay, so let me now run it through. So, okay, I got B, I got D and C. So let me take it through. So have a proficient internal audit staff member perform an assessment and disclose the impairment. Now, though you will be disclosing the impairment, but one of your team member is doing that assessment. So it is not giving the right picture because you are in a position to control your team member. Second, have a regulatory compliance staff member performs a self-assessment to be reviewed by professional auditor. Again, see, this CAE also has the operational responsibility for regulatory compliance. So not only manages the internal audit function, it also manages the regulatory compliance. So having regulatory compliance, it is not going to serve any purpose because that person is also part of his team member. Where as a proficient internal audit staff member perform the audit and report the results. So it's similar to A. It is not going to hold good. Contact the third party entity and external auditor. So this third one, contact the third party entity. So only the third party who has been given a clear mandate, they would be in a position to assess, and they are reporting directly into the senior management, which would be the right course of action for the CAE. So this is the last question. Then we will be going to the second topic for the day. A primary purpose of evaluating the adequacy of an organization risk management control governance process is to determine if it was designed to ensure compliance with policies, plan, procedure, laws, and regulation, provide reasonable assurance that organization objective will be met, mitigate inherent risk, and assures the reliability integrity of information used by management. So you have to select only one. So I got B. I got B. I got another B. And I got C. So I got B, C, D. Okay. So let's read the question. Primary purpose of evaluating the adequacy of organization risk management control governance process. So option A was designed to ensure compliance with policies, plan, procedures, laws, and regulations. So this helps that the company is complying with policies, plan, procedures, laws, and regulations. So it can be a good purpose, but this is the one. Let's explore the other. So I will now say D, assures the reliability integrity of information used by management. So all the information which is used is reliable integrity of their integrity. Now this can be a purpose. Yeah, it can be also purpose. So a purpose, so A and B can be a good purpose. Now let's see the purpose C, mitigates inherent risk. So whether risk management is able to mitigate the inherent risk. Can it be a purpose? Yes, it can be a purpose. Now provide reasonable assurance that organization objective will be met. Is this a purpose? Now this is where the life become interesting. What is the definition of internal auditing? So definition includes accomplishment of organizational objectives. Now, if there is, you are meeting, you are complying with all policies, plans, procedures, laws, and regulations, but your objective of whatever that objective, growth, profitability, service, are not being met. What use of other purpose would be? So I would say the answer is B. So this done with the my question. Now we jump to the part B of today's session. This is management of internal audit function, state a standard of internal auditing 210 and IIA standard 2000. So this is what the 210 requires. Achievement of overall objective of internal audit as outlined in the internal audit charter or engagement charter. So basically you need to have an internal audit charter, a resourcing plan, adequate skilled resources and expertise are in place and deployed well to provide the required level of assurance. Now, company wants you to conduct 10 audit, but you have only one resource, and two audits are of IT audit. The resource does not have IT capability. So, are you managing your function well? Answer is no. You need to have IT capability. So you need to have appropriate resourcing plan. Let's say company wants you to do 100 audit, but you have only two people. They can do only 20 audits. Is your resource plan is adequate? No. So you can do only 20 audits. Which 20 audits you need to decide? Are you need to hire more people? Internal audit process. So basically this is your SOP to ensure that all your assignments are systematic, disciplined and professional manner. Quality assurance and improvement program. The quality of work performed forms a sound basis for reporting. You're reporting based on the work done, which is supported by evidence and documentation. And works is conducted in conformance with the standards on internal audit and other related pronouncement issued by the ICAI. This standard requires it to have defined, put internal audit charter and plan, resourcing plan. This is one of the toughest thing. You need to do only one audit where, let's say, okay, if there are 10 audits, you need to do two IT audits. What to do? No, resourcing doesn't mean you need to have people in-house. You can also outsource them. So you can outsource those two audits, IT audits, if you don't have an expertise. Or it can be vice versa. Say one supply chain management audit, you don't have an expertise. So you can outsource that. Or you can say, okay, I don't have an expertise, but let me take a similar, equally important one, something else, or you will go and acquire that particular expertise. So you need to put all these processes in place so that you can be in compliance with the standard 210. This is the IPPF 2000 managing the internal audit activity. So it says that the internal auditors need to manage their internal audit activity and ensures that it adds value. The keyword is it's add value. And the definition you would say, you've seen that internal audit is the objective assurance and a value adding activity designed to add value, consulting activity designed to add value to the organization's operations and risk management processes. Planning. Establish a risk-based plan to determine the priorities of internal audit activity consistent with the organization goals. So what are the organizational goals? So what are the audit that you should carry out, what are the risks involved. So you need to create a risk-based internal audit plan. Communication and approval. So communication plan, resource requirement, including significant changes to senior management. So whatever is your plan, resource requirement, is there any change? Somebody, your department, two people have left out of two, then what are you going to do? Is there any limitation on the resource? So your board wants to conduct 20 audits, but you have one staff, you can do only 10 audits. So you need to communicate the resource limitation to the board. Resource management. Resources are appropriate, sufficient, effectively deployed to achieve the approved plan. So you have the right number of resources. They have the right kind of skill sets, competency, experiences, so that the plan can be achieved. Policies and procedures. So it's the establishment of policy procedures to guide an internal auditor. So it's like SOP, departmental manual for internal audit department. And coordinate and reliance. So sometimes you need to coordinate, sometimes you need to take reliance on the work done by somebody else. So share information, coordinate activities, your internal, external assurance service provider. Sometimes, idea is to avoid double work, to maximize the resource available to the organization, to avoid duplication of efforts. So if you are going to undertake an area which is also going to be audited by your ISO 9001, also going to be audited by some other guys, then there's no point of taking that area. Of course, provided the risk is also low. Reporting to senior management and the board. Report periodically to senior management and board on internal audits activities purpose. So it says ki you need to report, you need to re-emphasize what is the purpose, why the internal audit exists, whether is there any impairment to their authority, has any limitation placed on their authority, are they in a position to discharge all their responsibility, and what is their performance related to plan. Now, this plan can be your internal audit plan. Number of audits plan vis-a-vis actual audit conducted. They can also put the resource plan. What are the resource plan targeted to people? What is the actual 1, 3, 5, whatever? And reporting should also include significant risk and control issues. So here, sometimes you may have a question that my all those audit report contains the issues on risk and control. Then what do I need to do something more? Now, here you get in a chance, so you can do, you can either do report by report reporting, you can do quarterly reporting, you can do annual reporting. Idea is to give them a comprehensive overall information which tells them that you are discharging your duties appropriately. You whatever the budget, audit budget that has been given, you whether you have able to carry out that, whether you have done more, whether you have done less, what are the risk and control issues you have identified, what are the fraud risk you have identified, is there any other issues which is requires the attention of senior management. So sometimes we face issues ki what should we report. We face certain challenges. Should we report that or not? So standard requires that anything which has an impact on your independence, objectivity, plan, you should report them. This includes the software feedback also. And whenever an external service provider is being used, then it is the duty of the external service provider to inform organization that, hey guys, I am an external service provider, but it is you and you who has the responsibility to ensure that the internal audit activity is effective. That requires independence, quality assurance, right kind of staff. You should not be asking somebody who doesn't have the IT expertise to do an IT audit. So with this, I am almost at the end of my session. So what did I discuss that you want to know more about it? Feel free to ask any questions on internal audit. And what did I not cover that you would like to know? Is there something which you want to know which I have not covered? So anything you want to know, feel free to ask. So it is also an opportunity for me to learn. Should I stop sharing? So a question is what should be considered as value to add? Now this is $1 million question. See, one of my past organization, they used to calculate this value add across various segments. Revenue maximization is internal auditor is helping organization to maximize revenue. So, maximize revenue also means identifying revenue leakages, if any, identifying opportunities for more sales. If we are seeing some trend, we can highlight that trend to the company. Other venue is cost optimization, cost saving. Is there any opportunity to do the cost saving? So not only identifying of this uh, opportunity, but you need to also calculate and present to the board. Uh, and time saving. Is your recommendation is helping organization to save some time? Sometimes you can say that you are doing so much of activity through manual efforts, and you should implement a particular solution which is already available at zero cost or minimal cost, which can help you to do more savings, saving of your time saved is money saved. It can be improving the compliance effectiveness on the system. So the moment compliance effectiveness happens, then organization is preventing certain fines. They may also be preventing the risk of panel action where the panel action has been provided, and also help increase the reputation. Documentation. If documentation does not exist, and one of your recommendation can be you need to document that. Of course, this is the simplest recommendation that you don't have SOP for this particular activity. Now, while giving it, you need to also consider, is it worthwhile to have that documentation? So you can do this, and you know, let's for example, you are reviewing an accounting system, and you see that the staff is not using functions which can help them to work better. So that can be your value add. Key, this functionality is available in the system. If you use that, you can save time, you can reduce cost, your reporting would be better. So so basically anything you want to calculate can be shown as value add. A question is, for internal audit professionals coming back to India after 10 years in Gulf countries in internal audit, what are the areas that he should consider to add more value to internal audit for the organization in India? So you see, this question is in a way has been answered, but I will add couple of items. See, if you focus on fraud risk, if you focus on fraud risk, you will automatically identify a large number of areas which are prone to fraud. Fraud may not have happened, but if fraud exists, it can happen tomorrow, day after tomorrow. So once you recommend that, people are highly conscious of fraud. They themselves may be doing, some activity which is not right, but how dare someone try to make fraud on them? No one likes that. No organization likes that. Even if we take, something happens in Wirecard, so over that fraudster, they will not like somebody to do fraud on them. So no one likes that. So fraud is something which we can focus on, and the cost saving. Now, whenever I'm saying this value add, please remember, value add is useless if there are control efficiency. You can't add value without assuring that controls are working. Only control assurance and value add go hand in hand. You can't say I will give only value add, I won't do control assurance. That would be a recipe for disaster. So control assurance is a must given. If it is not there, there is no reason you as an internal auditor to exist. Value add to come as an add-on, because we want something more. In India, we want something more. कुछ ज्यादा मिलेगा क्या? आलू लेने गए हैं तो मेरे को थोड़ा सा मसाला दे दे, धनिया दे दे, वैसा है. So we want something more. So this is a must. So I would say fraud risk assessment, identify opportunity for fraud, cost saving, time saving, automation opportunity. This is something each and every company is looking for. So if you have any question, feel free to ask. So let me give you one differentiation between standards of internal audit as given by ICAI and standards as given by IIA. So IIA standard is more is tilting towards in-house internal audit function, whereas the standards of internal audit as given by ICAI, we are tilting towards the external service provider. Having said that, doesn't mean that it cannot be used by vice versa in in respective category of internal auditors, because as an internal auditor and as a member of ICAI and IIA, I am responsible to discharge duty to both IIA and ICAI. I need to ensure that when I'm doing my work, I'm following not only the IIA standards, but also ICAI standards, because non-following of any of the standards can help me, uh, I would be guilty, I can be held guilty for professional misconduct. The question is it required to provide hardcore IT training to cover system audit not being covered currently? So let me put it this way. If you are asked to do systems audit, so as part of the systems audit, you need to define what area you are going to cover. Let's take, for example, you are going to cover logical data maintenance. In logical data maintenance, you need to understand what does it cover, how to create how users are getting created, how the roles have been assigned, where to see what roles has been assigned, what kind of errors, issues, risk can come up in this role assignment, how and when a users will be disabled in the system. Is there any provision if some user is not logging into the system for let's say 7 days? Am I in a position to disable that? Now, this hardcore IT training I would say that as long as whatever training you are giving to your team members, they are able to justify that they are in a position, they get the competency to discharge their responsibility, it is fine. Now, hardcore IT training, I would say it may cover, audit of firewall. It would require a high level of intelligence. If somebody asks you to do, vulnerability assessment and penetration testing, somebody asks you to see that whether somebody is in a position to hack the system. Can you do that? Say it is called white hacking. Can you hack into our system? For that, you will need somebody who understands the IT system thoroughly, maybe having formal education in IT, or somebody is in a position to do that. So the training that you need, the competency you need, is to discharge the responsibility that has been cast on you as part of the internal audit plan. So you can reach out to me. This is my email address. This is my LinkedIn address, and this is my website. So you can reach out to me, and of course, I'm available for any questions you may have. So thanks for giving me an opportunity to learn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for the wonderful session. I am honored to give you a well-deserved vote of thanks on behalf of WIRC for conducting such a wonderful session on the topic of governing framework and basic principles set by the ICAI. Also giving a fair comparison between the standard of internal audit 210 and standard set by the IIA, which was fairly, honestly speaking, when this internal audit committee was framed, we had a discussion that considering these global scenarios and all, we need to have a comparison between the standard set by our institute as well as the standard set by the Institute of Internal Auditors. So, sir, thank you very much for giving a wonderful session on this topic. Also, kudos to you to keep the session alive by putting a question answers in your presentation and keeping the audience engaged as well. I'm sure the audience has got a great insight on this topic. I, on behalf of WIRC, again, thank you very much for sharing your valuable time with us. And thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, sir. Have a nice day. I also welcome our next faculty for the next topic of the ongoing refresher course. Welcome, sir.
Thanks.
We
Thank
have
you,
CA. Yes, sir. Thank you very much. We have CA Vinny Jajodia with us, who is having a partner in Mahajan and Ibera from whom over the last 17 years, who is going to take our next session, which is nature of assurance, that is standard of internal audit 110, and IIA attributes standards. So sir is having an experience of more than 17 years also. Sir has worked with two of the India's largest conglomerates, Reliance Industries Limited and Godrej, before joining as a partner in Mahajan and Ibara. Sir is also having leading a team of 60 plus professionals and serving 40 plus clients across industry verticals in the areas of risk consulting, designing of SOPs, cost optimization studies, forensics, and designing of ICAI framework. So without taking much of your time, sir, I would hand over to you for the next session. Happy learning.
Thanks for the warm welcome, Mr. Singh. Good evening, all the participants. just share the presentation. I hope everyone is able to see the deck.
Yes, sir, it is visible.
That's great. And my apologies, this is a very dry topic considering it is on the internal auditing standards without any numbers, except one number is definitely this is SIA 110. Other than that, you won't find any numbers. I've tried to make it very, very simple, trying to explain the concepts. And while I present, I will take various real life examples which I have faced or gone through in my career to make it more easy to understand. Yeah. Moving on to the content. So there are 4 topics which we are going to cover in today's discussion. One is on the introduction and the scope. That is the background behind SIA 110 on the assurance, and the scope, what it covers, what are the exclusions. Then on the objectives or the purpose behind SIA 110. And it also talks about what are the various assurance assignments, what are the various types of assurance assignment. It is very important to understand because each of the assurance assignment comes with a risk. So in case we are able to understand when we need to give what kind of assurance statement, we would be able to accordingly give an assurance report. And the final topic would be on the elements and the key elements which are part of the standard. Please feel free to ask any questions which you have. Let it be very interactive session. It will help a lot. As I told you in the beginning, it's theoretical. If you have questions on real-time basis, it will really help, and we would be together able to learn and move forward. Yeah. Sorry, it's not. Yes. So before starting with the discussions, what is very important is to understand what are the questions which we have in mind. It is said that a problem well stated is half solved. So that is very important because we need to understand the problem statement. So there would be various questions which would be coming into our mind. So like, why standard on assurance? Is there a requirement for a standard on assurance? It was, all the audits were carried out since long. Then suddenly why a standard on assurance got released and it is being followed? Is there a rationale behind that? Again, since 45 years, 50 years, I have been releasing the internal audit report. It is a very detailed report with all the risk rewards, risk recommendations, detailed observations. Is that not an assurance? It's a very detailed one. So should it be considered as an assurance? Does this standard provide any value addition, or is it a mere documentation? Just prepare an assurance statement, sign it and submit it. No, it has various repercussions, and it gives an entire broad guidelines under which we need to give an assurance statement. It helps the internal auditor to protect himself by driving various boundaries around which he must perform. Normally, assurance are linked to stat auditors. Why internal auditors? Internal auditors को भी assurance statement देना पड़ेगा. We are used to writing reports, but yes, again, there are many circumstances where we provide assurance or the comfort to the management. So again, defining the boundary, and this standard comes handy for us to help us out in preparing the assurance report. What precautions I need to take while giving assurance? Yes, the standard answers that questions. So that also gets addressed. Is there a defined format for assurance? Yes, there is a defined format, though it doesn't form part of this assurance standard. But yes, there is a separate standard on auditing where it gives a detailed format for the assurance as well. Assurance to be given to whom? Is it to the process owners, or who is required? Who is the person who will be the recipient of the assurance? Again, the standard answers that question as well. Are there any exclusions, or does it cover everything under the sun? No, there are exclusions to everything. So again, the standard also has certain exclusions, which we need to keep in mind. Yeah, so these are the various questions which must be cropping up in everyone's mind. I thought we'll jot down them and then try to address these questions in various different slides. In case you want to ask any questions or you have anything in mind, please feel free to speak. So I take silence as a reasonable assurance that, yes, we can move forward. Yeah, this is a very important slide where what it talks about why CI 110 was required, SIA 110 was required. See, as I mentioned in internal audit, we are used to have detailed observations. We give the risk of a particular observations. We give recommendations, multiple recommendations. What is the root cause of that particular observation? We also give the rating, your observation, whether it is critical, major, medium, high, based on various criteria. And even in some cases, we even rate the report overall function, procurement, whether it is a red, yellow, or a green, to give comfort. So all those things are there, but still SIA 110 talks about the assurance. Does it provide an assurance? All these, what we discussed above, no, it doesn't provide an assurance. What is missing? One is the conclusion to enhance the confidence. So though we may be giving the audit reports with the observations, but we do not conclude saying that the entire function is effective or not effective. The outcome on the subject matter and on the basis of a predefined criteria. For example, like if we take, for example, a procurement function which we are doing the audit for. So based on the skill set of the persons, you can validate hundreds and 200s of controls and keep on generating observations after observations. So there is no defined boundary to that. But similarly, if I say that you need to do an audit with respect to the purchase policy, so then it becomes a boundary that I need to give an assurance on the purchase policy, which is in existence and has been prepared by the management. So then it becomes a boundary, and purchase policy will have various criterias like vendor onboarding, criteria for vendor onboarding. What are the documents which needs to be collected for vendor onboarding? What are the minimum quotations which needs to be obtained? If it's on single quotations, what are the justifications which needs to be obtained? And similarly for vendor evaluations. So for an assurance, I need to have a criteria which becomes a purchase policy, a subject matter which talks about the effectiveness of the purchase policy, and then I need to give my opinion on that entire purchase policy. Then it becomes, then it gets covered as an assurance engagement. In an internal audit, when I'm doing an entire procure to pay, it is a completely an open end-to-end process review, which will cover various aspects. So SIA 110 bridges this gap. It talks about what are the missing links which we need to incorporate to give an assurance. Hope everyone is with me till this slide. Do I need to move a little bit slower or fast? Okay. So we'll move to the next section. Yeah. So these are the assignments which are not covered under SIA 110. The first one is the audit assignments, where, as I mentioned, where only summary of observations are there with recommendations without any conclusions. So those are not considered as an assurance engagement, hence not covered under this section. Similarly, the agreed upon procedures, there is a separate standard on that. So just to give a brief, these agreed upon procedures, they do not give any opinions. They only report findings. So clients need to make their own conclusions. We would state the fact. Yes, we have verified 100 purchase orders for approvals, and the approval were not there in these many cases. Now, whether there was a fraud or whether this is deviation to the purchase policy, these conclusions are left to the management to take. I just mentioned the facts. Similarly, statutory filing, where it is just a compliance report where I say that these are the non-compliances which I would be reporting. For example, non-compliances with Factories Act in terms of working hours, or non-compliances with labor license. These are again factual, where you say the deviations against the act. Similarly, the consulting engagements, for example, the due diligence assignments or a cost optimization study, if an organization has appointed us to as a consultant to reduce the fleet or the freight cost by 10%, then these are mere consulting engagements where there is no assurance on the controls, there are no assurance on the processes, hence cannot be considered as an assurance engagement. Moving on to the objectives of SIA 110. See, the first purpose is to have an outcome. That is, it should be conclusive outcome. Based on the controls which I have tested and the criteria which was given to me. For example, if I am testing the controls which are defined in the RCMs, so against the defined controls, I am giving an assurance that these are the controls which are effective, and it gives an assurance to the third party that they can be relied upon. Similarly, it also talks about 3 C's. One is clarity on whether the internal auditor will be able to provide an assurance at all. So are the evidence or the subject matter clear and consistent? If those criteria are not met, then as an internal auditor, you will not be able to provide any assurance. It also talks about 3rd C, which is on the essential requirement which must be satisfied. What are the prerequisites to give an assurance? Similarly, it clarifies what are the different types of assurance, nature of assurance that can be provided, and under various circumstances. Sorry, I will go a little slow. Yeah. So what the clarity on the nature of assurance that can be provided and under what circumstances. So these are the 4 objectives which the standard talks about. So there has been a request to go slow. I will go slowly in the subsequent slides. If you want me to take again the previous slides, I can take that as well. Okay, so I will start with the subsequent slides. Yeah, so talking about the elements of an assurance assignment. So there are 3 parties which are involved in an assurance assignment. The first one being an internal auditor who is going to verify all the controls, all the processes, or the framework, or whatever is the subject matter. He is the one who is going to verify, who is going to undertake this assurance assignment. So again, he's a very critical person. You can call him as a hero for this entire engagement, who would be conducting that entire assignment. Second is an auditee. So auditee is the process owner, or who owns that entire process or the function. For example, if you are doing a procurement review, so maybe a procurement head or a marketing, or maybe a particular plant operations, then the factory head. So that person would be an auditee who all the controls in auditee's function we are going to test. Third would be an assurance user. So assurance user is a third person for whom this assignment is undertaken. For example, for any company, an audit committee may ask an internal auditor to verify the procurement policy or a sales policy or an HR policy for a particular company. So in that scenario, the assurance user becomes the audit committee. Internal auditors is going to conduct that assignment, and auditee becomes a relevant process owners or the function heads for whom I would be conducting this review. Assurance user can also be, so assurance user can be, other than the company, it can also be a person in the company. For example, managing director of a company, he may appoint an internal auditor to give an assurance on the purchase function. So in that case, the managing director as well as the auditee both are in the same company. Similarly, an assurance user can also be any regulatory body like an RBI or a SEBI requirement, or in case there are any acquisitions where we need to validate a particular transactions, again, those can be an assurance user. So three-party relationship is must. One is the internal auditor. Second is the auditee. Third is the assurance user. That are the three basic criteria for giving an assurance engagement. So in case one is missing, then it will not be called out as an assurance assignment. So in case a procurement head approaches an internal auditor to give an assurance on the procurement function, that cannot be considered as an assurance assignment. Similarly, there are three key elements which are involved to give for an assurance assignment. One is the subject matter. Second is the predefined criteria and an outcome. So subject matter can be considered as an effectiveness of a purchase policy. Purchase policy becomes a predefined criteria or the boundary, and outcome becomes the result which an auditor is going to finally say that whether it is working fine, whether it is effective or not. And all these three elements I would be talking in detail in the subsequent slides as well. Then the third element is a written assurance report. So in case anyone gives a verbal assurance, that cannot be considered as an assurance assignment under this. So there has to be a written assurance report which needs to comply with the standard, and it should express an opinion. It should say that it is effective or an ineffective. It can't be hanging. The person for whom the assurance user whom we are preparing this report should be able to draw conclusion out of the report which has been prepared by the internal auditor. And it has to be in a standard format. I hope I'm going slow now.
Yes, sir. It is good
Yeah.
to go.
Okay, great. Moving on to the different types of audit assurance assignment. So as we said, there are different types of assurance assignment. So there are three types. One is a reasonable assurance, where the auditor expresses an opinion over the entire subject matter after conducting the entire audit, so that he is able to say that, in our opinion, internal control is effective based on this and this criteria. See, these criteria are very important. See, these assurance assignments are a comfort which you are giving to an assurance user. And also it comes with various risks associated with the engagement. So we need to be very particular in for what matter we are giving assurance, and what are the different steps which we would have performed, or the criteria which we would have used to give this assurance, so that the assurance user is aware that yes, and take the judgment accordingly. These are the steps which have been performed. So reasonable assurance is not an absolute assurance. We have a separate slide on that, but it gives an assurance that yes, all the subject matter which I have reviewed gives an opinion on that, whether it is effective or ineffective. Now, what is a limited assurance? Limited, the moment you see reasonable and limited means definitely it comes with certain restrictions. And at times, as an auditor, we may have to give a limited assurance. And how does limited assurance reads like? Either it will not cover the whole subject, or it will cover only a part of the subject. After conducting limited audit procedures, so we have not done a detailed data analytics or detailed control checks. We have restricted ourselves to few sample checks. In that scenario, how we report it as, based on our work described in this report, nothing makes us believe that internal control is not effective. So if you see the difference, in the first case, in a reasonable assurance, I'm saying that in our opinion, this is effective. It's in the case of limited assurance, it says that we do not believe that it is not ineffective. So, but at the same time, I'm not confirming that it is effective. For example, when we were doing an assurance engagement for a procurement function, for one of the buyer, all the comparative details were not available. So his PC has crashed and he was not having those details. So in those scenarios where there are lack of evidence, you can't give a reasonable assurance. You have to limit your assurance to various factors. That is very important, because because you owe a responsibility to the person whom you are giving this assurance statement. So considering that, you need to be very particular in what type of assurance you are giving. Similarly, there will be a no assurance. There will be a scenario where you are not able to provide any assurance. You are only able to provide a rating or a finding, but you are not able to conclude or give an opinion. So then those are no assurance assignment, which doesn't fall under these auditing standard. So just to summarize, there are two types of, if we talk about assurance, two types of assurance: reasonable assurance and a limited assurance. Reasonable assurance comes with greater responsibility, with detailed checks where we give our opinion. Limited assurance comes with limited checks. Either we limit ourselves to a particular subject, or because of the various circumstances, and we do not give our opinion in case of limited assurance. Another example of limited assurance would be if I would, for a purchase policy, I would have only conducted an assurance on onboarding portion because of XYZ reasons. So then that becomes part of limited assurance, because I'm giving my opinion on a part of a subject matter. Yeah. Moving on to the next piece. Reasonable assurance. So reasonable assurance, is it an absolute assurance? The answer is no. Absolute assurance means you are giving 100% assurance. Now, reasonable assurance means definitely not 100%. So this statement talks about reasonable assurance. So as an now the question must be, why reasonable assurance? So first is selective testing, because when you undertake these assignments, you would be definitely undertaking various tests, test sample checks. It may be accurate. You may be doing a statistical sampling by analyzing what are the different region-wise procurement and selecting across all the regions, doing analytics around various buyer-wise profiling and then selecting those samples. However, still, it is selective and is judgmental. So that comes with certain restrictions. Similarly, there are certain inherent limitations of internal controls. Because there are so many variable factors, it is very difficult to say that even if there are 100 controls or 50 controls which are defined in an RCM, we can say that with absolute assurance that all these controls are working effective. Reason being, there are various variable parameters which are in play, and as such, human is prone to errors. Everyone can make mistakes. So again, giving an absolute assurance is not possible in these kind of engagements. Evidences, normally, if you see evidences, they are non-conclusive, they are persuasive. For example, I will tell you, see, when we do an audit for suppose an OP, all the reimbursement expenses which are claimed for employees. So there are 10 reimbursement claims. So you get those bills, you see the claims of flights and train tickets and all, and see the approval mechanism. And you feel that, yes, these are all the documents which are there. And you say that the controls are effective. However, there are inherent risks. For example, in one of the case, we found that one of the employee, he has changed the train tickets. So exactly the similar tickets which was given by IRCTC, he used that ticket and converted into PDF and then canceled that ticket, and he submitted the ticket, and in one case even forged the ticket. So looking at the documents, we will assume that yes, this particular document is correct. However, there are limitations, and these are not conclusive documents which can give a 100% assurance that these are correct. So there are various, we rely on those documents. Similarly, the document, suppose in case the client is using SAP and you are taking a download of a purchase register or a sales register or a freight register. Now, we assume that the process owner who is giving these details has given a correct data. But since the data runs into lakhs, you can do a control total. But in case there are certain changes in between some of the columns and all, it will be very difficult to check those details. So again, so these are based on the data which has been received or what is there in front of us. So very difficult to have a conclusive, to derive a conclusion that yes, these are the, and give an absolute assurance based on these details. Similarly, use of judgment. See, all human beings, they have to apply logics whenever you are evaluating control. So and person to person, though it may be scientific, but still there will be human element which will be part of the entire engagement. Hence, it can't be called as an absolute assurance, but a reasonable assurance. Similarly, the characteristic of the subject matter. So like procurement, order to cash, all these subject matters, all these topics which are there has various risks which are associated with them. Hence, very difficult to give an absolute assurance rather than a reasonable assurance. So there is one question, I will read out that, we'll answer that. Hope everyone is fine with that. Yeah. So in case where we have a sample of 100 transactions and we get data for only 30, can we give any assurance? So definitely not reasonable assurance, because you have selected 100 transactions and you have been given only 30. So you do not know what is lying in those 70 transactions. So if you give an assurance on these details, even if this 30 would have been 90, still you would not have been able to give a reasonable assurance, because whatever you have asked for, that sample at least you should get in totality to give a reasonable assurance. So in case you have got any partial details, that cannot be considered as reasonable assurance. Now coming to limited assurance. Limited assurance again with a defined criteria, where we say that we have received 100 transactions, and out of that, in 30% of out of the 100 transactions we had asked for, in 30% of the transaction we have received, and those transactions are found to be are found to be effective. So that kind of assurance can be given. But what is very important in an insurance engagement is to lay down what are the criteria based on which you are arriving at to the assurance. So in this case, it is important to inform that we have been able to validate only 30% of the transactions, because these are the critical indicators of fraud. There would be possibility that in the remaining 70% of the transactions, those are suspicious transactions. Hence, the process owner is not providing any details. I hope I have been able to answer the question. Yeah. So we'll move to the next slide. Yeah. So Rajneesh has asked to repeat the answer. I understand. So Rajneesh, in case whatever samples you have asked for and you have not received the details for those samples, then in the assurance engagement, you need to specify that your limited opinion is based on the 30% or the 80% of the transactions which you have tested. So that the person who is going to receive this assurance certificate, he accordingly takes the he accordingly uses that assurance certificate. Great. Yeah. So we'll move to the next section. Yeah, moving on to the subject matter. So as we discussed, I moved to the previous slide. Yes, this one. So in an assurance assignment, we spoke about the three-party relationship, that is internal auditor, auditee, and assurance user. Similarly, as I mentioned, there is three elements. One is the subject matter as well, which is very important. So now let's talk about the subject matter. So subject matter is very critical because this is the broad function for which we are going to do the audit. For example, we are asked to do the effectiveness review of the procurement policy, or we are asked to review the disclosures relating to the related party transactions, whether those are effective or adequate. So defining the subject matter is very important. So it has to be identifiable, like a purchase policy or a disclosure with respect to related party transactions. Similarly, it should be consistent. For example, a procurement policy needs to be used from top to bottom by the organization. And anyone who uses this subject matter should be able to link with the outcome. Similarly, it should be verifiable. Means it should be well documented. If the purchase person says that, yes, verbally tells the internal auditors, yes, these are the various steps and all which we have been performing, or which are the guidelines, but those should not be taken as a, that cannot be taken as a verifiable subject matter. So very important to ensure that there is a clarity on the subject matter and it is consistent and it is well documented. Similarly, talking about the characteristics of a suitable criteria. So the third element is the criteria, a predefined criteria. A predefined criteria can be a code of conduct, which you will be using as a benchmark to evaluate the subject matter. It can be a code of conduct. It can be an HR policy. So what is very important is that the criteria which we are taken is complete in all respect. In case there are any missing elements in the code of conduct or in the HR policy, then relying on that criteria and giving an assurance will lead to incorrect results. Similarly, it should be relevant. The document, in case the topic is on the effectiveness of the code of conduct, or whether the training has been passed on to all the employees for the code of conduct, then code of conduct is a document which someone has to go through, rather than a whistleblower policy or any or a code of ethics. So it has to be relevant. It should be reliable. Again, the document based on which we are going to conduct the assurance engagement, that has to be signed and has to be approved to rely on that document. Understandability, again, that document needs to be understood in detail to give the conclusion. Similarly, the neutrality and the quality of available evidence. So in case I am making an opinion based on the code of conduct, in case there is a third person who also makes an opinion based on that that document, the result should ideally be almost same. So again, that becomes one of the important criteria, characteristic of a criteria. Any questions so far? Yeah, then we'll move. So this talks about what are the various forms which the standard talk mentions. The subject matter, what could be the various predefined criteria, and what are the various conclusive outcome. One of the form could be financial performance or conditions. For example, the financial position or the financial or the cash flow, a comment on the cash flow, or a payback period for a particular equipment. Like recently we did an assignment on to evaluate the payback period derived for a particular equipment was correct or not. So in those cases, the subject matter becomes the defined criteria. At the time of buying the equipment, you would have defined, yes, these are the outputs which would get generated from the equipment, and what is the defined payback period, like 3 years or 5 years, which have been defined at the initial stage. Similarly, this payback period would be defined in an accounting manual, which becomes a predefined criteria or the guidelines based on which one would be undertaking the assurance engagement. Non-financial performance could be the operational output of a factory, where the company wants us to validate the output which has been generated. Is there an opportunity to increase the efficiency? So then a factory manual becomes a predefined criteria where we need to go through that and see and validate against the various parameters. Similarly, in terms of physical characteristics, capacity of a facility. So then the technical specification document or a layout becomes important to check what is the total capacity of a particular facility and how it can be improved upon. Similarly, for an IT systems review, there can be an assurance assignment on the design and effectiveness of the IT systems, where we need to validate all the ITGC controls. So it would be governed by the IT policy or the IT related RCMs which we may have in place. There could be procedural compliances which may be asked for, like corporate governance, compliance with regulations, or human resource practices. Similarly, on the design and effectiveness, and the criteria would be the code of conduct to validate whether those are working effective or not. And would be the conclusive outcome, where we need to define that, yes, based on these criteria, we have been able to reach the particular outcome. And then finally, an assurance report, which should be a written report expressing an opinion about the subject matter. So a typical example, if you take for an internal financial controls, we have various RCMs which gets defined for each of the function. And now the engagement can be an assurance engagement, where we need to say that whether all the controls are effective. So we have a predefined RCM where the controls are defined. Based on that, we select various samples. And these samples are also as per the guidance note given by ICAI. And we document our test results. And then based on that, we give our assurance for all the functions. So this would be a typical example of an assurance engagement. Any questions so far? Because this is the last slide which I had. So I have not included definitions at all because those are already there. I tried to summarize them. Any questions? Yeah. So one of the question is, in case the criteria is not clearly defined, can we make limited assumptions and disclaimers? So a very good question. See, what is very important to understand is that when you are giving a reasonable assurance, there cannot be any ifs and buts. So if you are going to give various assumptions and disclaimers, see, assumptions means you stating that you have validated only 10% of the controls. But see, if you have validated 10% of the controls and you have selected yourself 10% of the controls and giving an assurance, then you have to own that assurance. So limited assumptions are not allowed. You need to give an opinion based on the defined criteria. And these criteria needs to be defined at the beginning of the engagement. Very clear. Yes, these are the things which are needs, which will be verified. And also in the engagement, we need to mention those criteria. So even if you make assumptions or disclaimers, you will be held responsible for the assurance which you are giving once you are giving an opinion. Any other question? Whether the industry benchmark can give, there is no defined criteria. Yes, industry benchmarks can be defined criteria, definitely. However, what is important is to define those industry benchmarks. For example, if you, for input-output loss or a scrap wastage in a textile industry is 10%. So if you are taking that as 10% as a benchmark, you need to have a valid evidence. It should be as per the details which has been published. And against that, you need to mention what are the deviations with respect to the assignment which you are undertaking. Any other questions? In case you have any questions with respect to internal audit also, please feel free to ask. Since we have time, we'll try and see if I can answer those as well.
I think we have got one question right now, sir. If you can address that question.
Yes. So in an IFC assignment under HR function, documents are not provided. Instead, the process owner insists to show the documents approval email on screen by online meeting, as it is very critical. How to tackle such a problem, please guide. A very valid question again. In fact, recently we were doing an IT audit for one of the MNC, and for reason of confidentiality, they say that no, we would be able to share these documents. However, one should understand we as an auditor needs to have our backup documents, and especially in case of assurance engagements, those will be required since you are giving an assurance. So that you need to have a detailed documentation. So ideally, you should give a screenshot or the relevant documents for us to give an assurance. For us to give an assurance certificate. In case of And I understand you're talking about IFC assignment, so it would be an assurance engagement. So then those documents are required because as such, all the details which we test as a management testing are also used by the statutory auditors. They are also going to rely on those documents. So in these kind of scenarios, I think the only way out is to reach out to the head HR or to the CFO and explain that these are the documents which are mandatory and will also be required by stat auditors to conduct the testing. Any other questions you have?
Sir, I would just like to have clarity on one of the question. In fact, I would like to extend the previous question related to IFC auditors.
Yes.
So
yes.
currently also I'm doing an IFC audit for a very large entity. It's not the kind of statutory IFC. We've been given a task of internal IFC audit sort of thing, which the state auditor would be relying on our report. So are we supposed to give an assurance to them, or just as the earlier we used, what assurance basically does it count as an assurance because we are just giving our findings and observations sort of thing?
Yeah.
So the management actually expect us to give an absolute assurance sort of thing on that report. So is it possible or is it viable for us to give that kind of report to the management?
Yeah. So see, in case all the controls which have been documented in RCMs are tested and all the samples have been selected, then and you find that controls are effective, you can give an assurance to the management, certainly. At times, even audit committees want that assurance in terms of management testing. But in case these documents or the details are not available, and suppose like the auditee, a classic example where the auditee says that you don't select these 25 samples, I will give you 25 samples, aap wo le lo, and pass the controls. Then in those scenarios, we should put our foot down and we should clearly indicate the management that these in these controls are not effective and we will not be able to give an assurance. Or what we can say that compliance with the agreed upon procedures, we can, rather than giving an assurance, we can say that, yes, these are the controls which we have tested and the results are mentioned. So we are not saying that giving an absolute assurance, we are giving a fact-based report to them. Based on that, if they are fine with few key controls not being effective or few non-key controls not being effective, that is a judgment which a management can draw, but then you are protected because you are not giving any assurance.
Sir, so one of the team member, who is a very senior person, actually was advising us that we should not use a word like audit sort of thing. We just need to use word that summary of observation kind of thing.
Exactly.
Also, lately I came to know that the management is not going to issue the same report to the stat auditor. They might be just giving a portion or part of that. So is it even as an IFC auditor, what responsibility lies with us? I would also like to know that.
See, there is an definitely, see, we are responsible for the controls which we are testing. And stat auditor is relying on our controls as well, though he is also responsible because he has to do his independent testing as well. So he can't say that just he has relied on the internal auditor's testing results. Now, when we are sharing our results to the management, we have to be very careful in the words which are being used and the documents which we are sharing with them. So if we are just sharing them a list of controls and the status, whether those are effective, non-effective, and the action plan. And then later on, those results, in whatever way they are using, it is their responsibility to take it forward. So in our case, the engagement was with the management we have given these results to the management. And now, in case he's changing anything and giving it to stat auditors, then those are responsible because we have all the documentary evidence to indicate what we have done the testing and what we have shared with the management.
Understood completely, sir.
Right. And one of the question is HR function is companies are very strong, yes, because they define, they do the appraisals. At times, they also don't listen to CFO personnel. Yeah, again, a valid statement to make. But see, try and understand, I can tell you in 17 years of my experience, there have been multiple instances where we would have put our foot down. See, there are few things which can be compromised, but there are few things which are completely non-negotiable. So in case the HR function wants us to certify all the controls which are in his department are working effective without giving any document to that effect. And so in those cases, definitely we should say that we would not be able to give a positive affirmation on the compliances. So he may escalate it to CFO, he may go to MD. I think ultimately they will understand that you are, at the end of the day, you are doing your duty. You have been given an engagement by either a CFO or an MD. They should understand if they are expecting a correct result from you, you will require certain documents. So I think it is up to them. It is very important for them to respect your decision for the relevant documents which are required. Because similarly, in case of internal audit, you will keep on facing various scenarios where you will not get details. And these are the, I would say, typical cases where the fraud emerges later on. So we need to be eyes and ears of the management and should be alert to identify these scenarios and be very careful while giving our opinion or giving our report. Any other questions?
हेलो
Yes.
सर क्वेश्चन नहीं सर सर आपके क्वेश्चन बॉक्स में आपको दिख रहा है सर क्वेश्चन सर
नहीं, HR फंक्शन वाला दिख रहा है, उसके बाद चैट में है क्या?
बस अभी देख नहीं सर एग्जीक्यूशन नहीं. थैंक यू सर.
Yeah. That I answered.
Sir, I think answered by sir already.
My apologies for being fast. Sorry. Initially, I was fast, and I hope I have been able to cover. So I tried to make it interesting by using a abridged version rather than giving lengthy definitions and all. So hope you have learned something out of that.
Definitely we have, sir, and it was absolutely effective, I think, the way it was communicated to the participant. I think all the participants have now clarity on this topic. So I think if there are no further questions from the participant, we can conclude the report if the discussion, if you have done from your end. So before concluding the session, sir, I would like to thank you on behalf of WIRC for giving a wonderful presentation and sparing your valuable time and giving insightful on the topic of this standard of internal auditing and assurance management. All the participants, I'm sure all the participants have great learning.
I think we've got disconnected. Yeah. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Now, yes. thanks to WIC for inviting me, and thanks to all the participants for their valuable time.